Well, welcome everybody. I think it looks like we have about 16 participants. The recording is running. We've got some interesting things to talk about tonight. Steve's going to talk to us about some stuff there. I think we might go there first. I want to stall a little bit for latecomers to come. I have a fishbowl of tickets ready to give away this radio right here, and somebody in this bowl that went to our Salmon Run event this weekend is gonna get this radio. You probably have to come and get it, and that should be okay. That should be okay. And the good news is that while I was getting the thing ready to go, I found this right here, which is a complete RTS Systems dongle to program that radio, and it includes the CD-ROM so that you got everything you need to know. I have a hunch that most people skip the CD and just run chirp. That's what I'm assuming, but you got the cable.
I was gonna say, I just ran that same exact radio this morning at the hospital. So if you want to copy the hospital radio, you could do that.
Oh, that would be a great idea. I don't have any tickets in the bowl though, so that's okay. So Steve, why don't we start with you? What can you tell us? What's new in the land of Hamlib and all that?
Okay, sure. I posted a note the other day about a $29 computer that's a little bit bigger than a Raspberry Pi that's available from a company in Oregon. And Galen is holding it up upside down, but he's holding it up.
Galen, say something so the camera will jump to you.
Okay, well, now I have to turn my mic on in order to make that work. So
we received them on the same day today, and I managed to get mine going. But as you can see, it's pretty small, and it's basically an Android, or originally was built to be an Android set-top box. So it has an Ethernet port, an HDMI port, a USB 2 port, and a USB 3 port. And a micro SD slot in it. It has eMMC memory inside, 16 gigabytes of memory. So there's no micro SD card needed.
Okay,
it's
Steve,
already.
Tell us, what is what is?
It's kind of a flash storage medium, I guess you'd call it. It's a chip that's actually on the motherboard of this computer, rather than it's not removable, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the operating system is on that in that memory, that eMMC memory. And Galen's holding up a power supply. It's a wall wart power supply. It operates on 5 volts, 2 amps. It looks like he bought paid an additional $10 and also got a USB hub and a USB Bluetooth / 802.11 AC Wi-Fi dongle that plugs into one of the ports. So that the unit itself has a built-in 802.11 BG radio, which only operates on 2.4 gigahertz. That little dongle gives it another Wi-Fi interface that can operate on both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, and gives the device Bluetooth capability, which it doesn't have built in. Plus you get a USB hub. For an additional $10, that's a pretty good deal for that. Somebody posted a note after I did that said that some people are using this for ham radio applications, and it does generate some noise, or specifically wall wart that comes with the unit generates noise. I haven't tested it enough to know whether or not that's the case, but
You also get an HDMI cable.
right, you also get an HDMI cable. But in any case, Dave Reese, W1HKJ, who's the developer of the Fldigi suite, posted some very nice instructions. He just got one as well on how to install the Fldigi suite on this radio, which he did. And so I just followed his instructions. And in addition, I installed the VNC server on it. It's very easy to do. One thing that you should know is that this does not run the Raspbian operating system. Okay, it runs the Armbian operating system. So you can't, I shouldn't say you can't put Raspbian on it. I'm not sure what would happen if you put Raspbian on it, but they are both derived from the Bullseye Debian kernel. So, you know, they're very similar. The desktop interface is a little bit different. And I will share my screen here if Bud will give me control.
You have control.
Okay,
and
thank you.
While Steve's getting that ready, if somebody has a URL for this thing that they can pop in the chat room, we'll make use of it later.
Okay. All right, so this is it's called the Quadra. And it's from a company called Inovato, I-N-O-V-A-T-O. And what they did is they went to China and they bought a whole bunch of these what were originally Android set-top boxes that run an ARM rock chip CPU. It's about the same horsepower as a Raspberry Pi 3. Like I said, it has 16 gigabytes of memory on board, and it has 2 gigabytes of RAM. And the way so what I'm running right now is Fldigi, and you can see the waterfall is kind of a little bit jerky, right? It's not smooth like you normally see in a Raspberry Pi. Now, I'm looking at the CPU for this guy. This thing has 4 cores like the Raspberry Pi, and it doesn't seem to be overtaxing the CPU. So I think maybe this is just an artifact of the VNC server. It's not necessarily that this waterfall is behaving this way in Fldigi. But these applications seem to work fine. It takes a little while for them to appear on the screen, and again, I'm not sure if that's the computer itself or it's an artifact of the VNC server that it's running. I have to hook it back up to a monitor to verify this. I did the first thing I did was install a VNC server on it, so I wouldn't have to. So I could VNC into it from my big computer where I have large monitors. But in any case, it seems to work okay. I'll report more on it as the more testing I do. But one thing I was telling Andy about, one of the past meetings, we talked about the system that we're going to be putting up at Lookout. And there's actually 2 Raspberry Pis that are going to go up there. One of them is the regular Nexus device, and the second Raspberry Pi is connected to a USB relay board, which we're going to use via a web interface to remotely power on and off devices as needed. And this little computer, this $29 computer, would be an ideal computer for that purpose, for connecting to that USB relay module and installing the web software on it and remotely controlling it that way. So certainly less expensive than a Raspberry Pi. I think it's less expensive than the old price of a Raspberry Pi 3, in fact. I don't remember. I lost track of what the prices are now because
Well,
they're
I'm
just
looking at
exorbitant.
$29.95 right now on my screen with the link that Rob put out. What's the GPIO? Is it, how are you keying your transmitter and whatnot?
There is no GPIO. Okay, so that's a very good point. You cannot connect a Nexus board to this. You can't trigger any kind of pins for rig control on this. So what I'm using here is I have this connected to an ICOM 7100, which provides a USB interface that carries the audio because there's a built-in sound card on the 7100.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm using FL Rig to trigger push to talk.
So there's a USB cable that handles both audio and the rig control.
That's correct. Yep. Mm-hmm. So this would be a good choice for those of you who don't, who have a radio that have a built-in audio card. I think in almost all cases, the ones that do break that out via USB. But if you have a rig that has a mini DIN 6 on it, like a lot of us do, you could also connect a SignaLink to this Quadra, if any of you still have a SignaLink. And then, because that provides a USB interface, and then Vox control to the SignaLink, and then it's closes a relay contact to the radio via the mini DIN 6.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, and I think if anybody wanted to fool around, and I'm inclined to give it a try with Criag KM6LYW, has a whole suite of software out. He's been using the same sound card we use for his DigiLink, I think he calls it. A DigiPi is what he calls it. But his is basically a web server, and you use any device in your house that can access the web page that's on board, and you can control all the apps that almost all the apps that we're using. So I would think that maybe his software package might run on this.
Yeah, except that he can't use the FeePi.
No, what he's doing, mostly now what he's doing is he's hooking straight, just like you said, a USB to the radio.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
that's using the sound card in the radio.
Yeah, and I think he's been using the Pi, the half-size Pi.
Yeah, the Pi Zero.
Pi Zero, is that right? He's been using Pi Zero?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this would be a step up from the Pi Zero, definitely.
Yeah, it'd be worth trying. Yeah. There's an add to cart button right in front of me. I might just have to push it.
Right.
There was two options. I might go back and look. What was the other one?
There's $29.95 and $39.95.
Can I dump your screen?
Sure.
Or you can. Let me.
I'll stop share.
But
yeah,
what I got was the $39 one.
Okay.
That's the extra stuff that you get. The USB hub and then power supply and all the other stuff.
This is the link that Rob put in the chat room. Okay, so what's the little dongle here? And
yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. It has, the unit itself has a built-in 2.4 gigabit Wi-Fi interface. What that little dongle provides is a 2.4/5 gigahertz radio interface and Bluetooth. Okay, so the unit itself does not have Bluetooth, so that's what that dongle gives you. And then you also get that USB 3 hub there, and just those two things are more than $10 anyway. For us to buy them separately, because it's a fairly decent Wi-Fi dongle, the USB dongle there.
And Craig just came out today with a video of he was actually out of California. He was up in Newport, Oregon, demonstrating how to use Bluetooth on his Android phone to talk to a radio, Kenwood radio that had APRS, and he was able to send messages and stuff like that using Bluetooth. So there's some possibilities here.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems to work fairly well. I did a couple of FSQ things on it. That's all I've done so far, but it seems to work all right. So any questions on that?
I have a question.
Yep.
Is there any reason you couldn't use like a Sabrent sound card?
No, that attaches via USB, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that would work fine.
That's what I'm using for my HF radio when I got onto it. What, 58?
Right. Yeah, you still have do you use some kind of a serial connection to it for CAT control and push to talk?
Yeah, I have a programming cable that comes with it. And so it's basically the same. I just use that little external sound card and the cables for the phone and the mic.
Yeah, it shouldn't be any problem at all. In fact, when I plugged in my ICOM 7100 USB cable into this computer, this little computer, it immediately recognized it as I expected it would, because it's Debian Bullseye. So it's the same kernel that the latest Raspbian uses. It was quite easy to set up. I also installed Fldigi and HamLib using packages that I had built for the Nexus DRX, and they installed fine and worked, much to my surprise. I didn't have to do any modifications or anything to them. So I added the DRX repository to the apt APT configuration on this Quadra and installed those applications, and it worked great.
Steve, is there any performance benefit of using one of those hacked up USB sound cards that taps into the GPIO or the IO on the sound dongles versus a SignaLink USB? Does the hardware push to talk work any better than the Fox?
As a practical matter, I don't think it does. But if you think about it, there's certainly less in the path to actually trigger push to talk if you can actually use a contact closure.
Yeah, that's what I've always thought. Fox was always fraught with peril as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, a lot of people use SignaLinks, and they're deployed in many MCOM environments, and they seem to work fine. They don't work if you want to pass, use the higher speed modems, the 9600 modems.
That's slightly qualified. The same guy who makes the high performance audio interfaces, Masters Communications, has a replacement board for a SignaLink that basically completely fixes that issue.
Oh, really? Oh,
yes.
Wow.
It's hilarious.
All right. So, the SignaLink is still a player, definitely. No.
Well, I haven't actually thrown them away, but I've been tempted.
Okay. Oh, and one last note is that the Quadra, the Armbian operating system that is installed on the Quadra is a 64-bit operating system, unlike the Raspbian that I've been recommending for the Nexus. And, the same caveats apply. There are some ham radio applications that simply don't work on 64-bit operating systems, and I'm assuming they won't work on the Quadra either because they don't work on the Raspberry Pi. So, but Fldigi, Direwolf, the big players, WSJTX, I would expect all of those guys to work. The Lin BPQ and Pi ARDOP C, probably not. He hasn't built the 64-bit versions of those, and it doesn't, the source code he provides doesn't work, or I can't get it to work under a 64-bit operating system. So, but the major programs probably would work okay on this. Has
anybody pulled the case off of that thing to look inside? Is there maybe a way to get at some GPIO?
As I understand it, the board that they have does not have any kind of GPIO capability in it. It just wasn't called for these TV set-top boxes.
Oh,
so,
okay.
You know, to shave a few bucks off, they didn't implement anything like that. Now, Galen has purchased a slightly higher powered with more memory raw set-top box. Basically doesn't have any operating system on it, or probably has Android on it, if anything. And he's going to try to get, I'm assuming, load Armbian on it. And I don't know if that one has GPIO pins, Galen. I'm guessing probably not.
You're muted, Galen.
Not from what I see, it looks pretty much like this does. I mean, it's, you know, it's a box in a plastic case.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe there are any other, I haven't seen any mention of GPIO and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. And so a word of caution, none of my scripts for the Nexus DRX are going to work out of the box on Quadra. You know, the usernames are different, and the locations of certain files are different. So, you know, if you're going to get this box and run Fldigi on it, I recommend that you build it from source. And so if you're not comfortable doing that, you don't know your way around Linux very well, this could be a pretty daunting project to, you know, put the same apps on this Quadra as you're running on the Nexus DRX. Just a word of warning.
So it's just, you know, how close to the bleeding edge do you want to be?
Right, right.
We'll give it a few months and see what happens.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, in the chatting about this, does this look like it's a sustainable thing, or is this was like a one-shot purchase of a discontinued product?
Well, I guess it depends on how many people buy it. This company, they're based in Portland, and they seem to be really enthusiastic, and they seem to be selling a lot of units, or as many as they can get their hands on, I should say.
Right, they're asking
still a
people,
supply chain.
They're asking people to dial back on the orders, dial back to 6. Yeah. My gosh.
Right, and you know, I'm sure they're having the same supply chain problems that everybody else is too.
Yeah.
But, yeah. But these are definitely available if you only want one or two. They are available, and I got mine in 2 days. So.
And they're only selling them in the U.S. right now.
Yes, they're only shipping to the U.S. Correct. Yep.
Okay.
I believe a few folks in the UK are complaining about that already.
Yeah.
I'm sure they are. Yeah.
Well, let's sneak them over there to them.
I did want to add, if you're really in need of GPIO, they do have breakout boards that you can get if you know how to solder and stuff like. Well, I think some of them are even pre-built, but I just put a link to one of them. But if you really need GPIO, hey, you can hack your way into getting it.
Yeah, the board that Rob is talking about is a board that provides GPIO pins, and there's some electronics in there, and it has a single USB connection to the computer.
Yep.
There's some special software that you run on the computer that can allow you to access GPIO pins on this breakout board.
Yep.
How much is it, Rob?
This one is $15.
Okay.
You could probably go straight to Adafruit, and it's probably, well, probably 15, but no, probably about 12. I'm not sure. I knew these were out there. I just never really, I don't have any. But one that I was looking at had a lot more GPIO pins, but that thing was like $60 or something like that. That was a while back.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you're in dire need of GPIO pins and all you have is USB, you can do it this way.
Yep. But again, remember there's software that has to be installed and configured on your computer in order to use those. So
Python's great for that.
Yeah,
I'd imagine that's
right.
the same for like an RS-232 USB converter as well. You'd have to have the necessary drivers in that. Then
no, that'll recognize, if you have a USB to serial converter, that'll recognize it right off the bat. You don't need to put any special drivers. Yeah, that's part of Linux, correct. I plugged in a couple. Yeah, I plugged in a couple of USB to RS-232 converters that I had from different manufacturers, and it instantly recognized both of them and assigned them to serial port interfaces in the operating system. So, yeah.
Okay, should we give away a radio?
Okay.
So this weekend, this past weekend was Washington State's QSO Party, which is called the Salmon Run. And without going into a lot of detail, basically the idea is the state of Washington puts on an on-air event, and people around the country, around the continent, are going to try to work as many counties in the state of Washington as possible. And so we set up the Blaine ACS communications van at the Marine Park in Blaine. It's a great site. We're less than 1,000 yards from the border. You can look out across the lawn and see the Peace Arch. And we had an off-center fed dipole up in the air, and we had a radio on the air, and we made it available to various operators. And we tried to work all 39 counties, and we ended up with 39 checks. And it was kind of fun. It's a 2-day event. It shuts down at midnight, but Art pulled the plug around 8:30 Saturday night, and Bob was there Sunday morning at 9 to start it up for the second section of the contest. And by the time Art had stopped, I think we were missing 3, maybe 4 counties, and they were rough ones, hard ones to get. Pend Oreille in particular is really difficult to get, and it was the first thing that Bob worked Sunday morning. And then Randy sat down and made a dozen or more contacts and finished the list for us. So the last one we worked was Okanagan, and Randy got it for us to fill in the entire list. And here's our log. It's not filled out exactly the way the columns were intended, but it works. We wanted to get as many operators on the air as possible, including operators who had technician class licenses, because we could let a general or an extra class could let a technician borrow their call sign and sit next to them and be a control operator. And so we had a few technicians on the air too, and they all said they thoroughly enjoyed it, and we're hearing enthusiastic promises from them that next year they're going to have a general class or higher license. So we've got the call sign here that that we used on the air, and then over here we have the operator's name as opposed to the operator's call sign. So like Rob is in here, and he was using Mark's call sign. and people were using my call sign, and we just were knocking them off. I got on the air about 1905, 7:05. It was when 80 meters just barely opened. I kept waiting for 80 meters to open up. The sun was starting to go down. I got on the air and I started calling CQ, and they just came after me, one after another, after another, after another, after another. I just worked this whole string. I had to hand the log over to Ryan, and so if you look at the time, some of them are more than 1 a minute, and we cleaned up there, and then this is the next morning. It starts in right about here. This is when when Bob worked Pend Oreille, I couldn't find Pend Oreille on the list, and he accidentally logged it as Pierce County. And I looked up the call sign and confirmed, because he said I worked Pend Oreille, and confirmed that that this guy is in Newport, Washington. So we definitely had Pend Oreille, and we finished it up. We finished up with 102 contacts, which made me feel really good. We had a total of 17 people show up. When you show up, you get to put 2 tickets in the fishbowl, and just with your call sign on them. And if you work 2 or more stations on the air, you get to throw in 2 more tickets. And so I went through the tickets and recorded all the call signs that I could find in there. And there were 16, but then I didn't put any tickets in there. So there were 17 people that showed up for the event, and we had 13 operators. I'm going to call it 14 operators because Stan worked 40 or 50 stations from home before he came out, and that was good. So we let him throw in extra tickets as well. And the prize, as I showed earlier, well, I just hold it up here, is this is donated, an anonymous donor has provided this. It's brand new in the box. It's an FT8900 quad band FM transceiver. It includes the hardware for, what do they call it, a separation kit, so that you can have the radio somewhere else in your vehicle if you want, and a nice mount to mount it. And I stumbled on to this also, which is the RT Systems cable for programming the radio. It's got a CD-ROM in there with some software in it from Yaesu. I'm almost certain that this, you just use Chirp, but that's gonna go to our lucky winner. Let's find out who it is. I'll put this behind my shoulder here, and I'll stir it up really good. Each one of these tickets has a call sign on it. Let's see what we've got. Oh my gosh. It is our buddy Rob.
No way. I don't win jack anything.
KG7 GTC.
What?
And you know,
No way.
with your technician license, you can work every one of those bands.
Holy cow, no way.
Congratulations,
that is awesome.
Rob. Yes.
What the hell?
Whew. Well, I'm really happy about that. That's great. Goes to a technician.
Wow.
Now you better get your general.
Absolutely. Well, I've been studying all day for it today too, so you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is awesome. Holy cow.
Anybody else have any comments or anything they want to share about the Salmon Run? Congratulations, Rob.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to just thank everybody that participated. It was really a fun weekend. It gave people a chance to get on the air that, like Rob and Ryan and some that don't have a general, got a chance to find out that there is something more than 2-meter FM in your handheld. So anyway, hands off to everybody that participated, came out, and we're already talking about the next one.
Yes, for sure. You know, we kind of rewrote the rules for ourselves because we weren't like in the contest. We don't intend to submit our logs. However, I do have scanned them, and if you were an operator and you want their JPEGs, I can email them to you, and you can see your own log there. But the goal was to get as many different people on the air as possible, and I mean we did good. But you run into the problem of, as you work along through the event, you're hearing these strong stations, and you're telling a technician, no, you can't work him, we've already worked him. No, you can't work him, we've already worked him. So by having each operator use their own call sign, then it didn't matter if somebody else had already worked that station with another call sign. It's still legitimate. It gives that other station a point, and in many cases a multiplier. So we feel good about that. But the goal was to get people on the air, and truly the people who got on the air and made their first ever HF contact, like Deb, they were really excited about being able to do that. So I think we should do it again next year.
Bud, we had that one string of 4 or 5 of us that made that one call to start off me, and then it was the guy down in California.
Yeah.
And you picked it up, and then Mark picked it up, and then somebody else picked it up. And so it's just one after another.
Our first contacts were all out of state. We worked California, we worked Oregon, we worked Tennessee, we worked Missouri, was it? You know, and that was exciting. We had 2 or 3 rigs set up on tailgates out on the lawn. And it's amazing to see Dave, for example. He's got his radio sitting there on the back of his truck, and he's got this little stick sitting up in the air, and he's talking to Tennessee, right?
Yep.
Off of this little thing, and you go, whoa! Amateur radio is just short of a miracle, if you ask me. That we can tickle the ionosphere and make a contact that far away. Yeah. So, do I sound enthusiastic? I'm sorry. What's next? Well, I
was going to talk about the TNC.
Yeah, the TNC control. Yeah.
Yep.
Take it away.
Okay.
You made some changes there for us.
I did, yeah. So I'll just chat about them first. Some of you use the Direwolf TNC and PAT manager or controller that's been available for the Nexus DRX for, I guess, over a year now. So I rewrote that script, and I've added ARDOP to it. And the new application is called TNC Manager. It does everything the other app did plus RDOP. And it looks slightly different than the other application. And so I'll just show you what it looks like here. And let me see, make sure I get the right screen to share. Okay, so this is available in the Nexus Updater, and if you update Direwolf Utils, it'll automatically install this application, and it will put a menu item in the ham radio menu called TNC Manager. Okay, the original one is still available. It's called, maybe I removed it. it looks like I've removed it from this computer. No, it's here. It's still here. The Direwolf TNC and PAT GUI is still available, but I've deprecated it, and I'm not going to do any more development on it. But you know, so you can delete it or remove it from the menu if you want to, and replace it with the TNC manager. Either way, you can use the old one if you're not interested in ARDOP, or you can use the new one. Even if you're not interested in ARDOP, you can still use the new one. Okay, so I'll start this guy up. And you'll notice I'm running my Python program that controls my TM D710G here. That's connected to my radio, which is currently on. The new manager initially opens this text window here. It's actually a terminal window that tells you what's going on. And the manager is separate from the monitor window. I did that because it's just easier to see what's going on. You don't have to toggle back and forth between the tabs here. And the other thing is you can get colors in here. If you turn Direwolf colors on, you can see the colors in this screen here. Okay, so the manager has these 6 tabs on it. The first tab is the startup tab. And you check these boxes depending on what you want to automatically start when you run this TNC manager. So you can start PAT, you can start Direwolf, you can start ARDOP, or all 3, or any or all of those, or none of them if you want to, although I don't see any point in running it at all if you're not going to run any of them. But anyway, you can do that there. You can have this TNC manager automatically start based on your piano switch levers. So you can select, if you want levers 1, 3, and 4 on to trigger this to start up when the Raspberry Pi boots. You can select this, and it will automatically create a script for you and put it in your home directory. So the next time your Pi boots, if your switches are in the right position, it will automatically launch this Pi manager, this TNC manager. Okay, so that's what that is. I don't have that enabled right now, but I did have all these boxes checked. So when I started this application, PAT, Direwolf, and ARDOP started. Now I'm using, well, I'll just go through the tabs here. It's probably easiest. This is for the X.25 stack, and it tells you the AX25 port it's going to use. This is located in a file under etc AX25 ports, I believe it's called. And it has some default configurations for TX delay, TX tail, persist, and slot time. These are just default parameters. You can change those if you want to. Usually the application that you're using, excuse me, the application that you're using will adjust these. Like I believe PAT can do that, and other applications that use Direwolf, you can, and I know RMS Express does as well. You can configure them in RMS Express, and they will override these settings on a per connection basis. Okay, so these are just kind of default values, which you can change if you want to. On the ARDOP tab, the implementation of ARDOP that I'm using here was written by the same Ham who wrote the Lin BPQ applications. Okay, and it's called Pi ARDOP C. You can see some messages that are flying by over here in the terminal window. And it is a modem, an ARDOP modem, that provides a rather primitive interface for push to talk. But what basically the minimum configuration is you tell it what audio capture and playback device you want to use. I currently have this set to FPI capture right for capture and playback, which happens to be where my Kenwood is tied at the moment. And for push to talk, it does, the Pi ARDOP application has the ability to control push to talk via GPIO pins. I haven't found that to be terribly reliable, however. So I wrote some, I didn't write some code, but I'm using SOCAT, which is sort of the Swiss Army knife of Linux. And that simulates a serial connection so that you can use HamLib, which in turn talks to this Kenwood controller. There's more to it than that, but basically the options under push to talk here are GPIO 12 for the left side of the radio, GPIO 23 for the right side. Again, I haven't found those to work terribly reliably with ARDOP C, but your mileage may vary. Or rig control D network. Okay, that's what I'm using right now, and that seems to work pretty reliably. The other option is that the client handles push to talk. So if you select this option, then ARDOP-C doesn't control push to talk at all. It will depend on whatever client you're using, PAT, for example. And PAT will do the push to talk via rig control through the application, through rig control D, ultimately talking to the Kenwood controller down here in my case. Okay. I'm making it sound way more complicated than it is, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background. This field tells you what port it's listening on. So applications that use ARDOP communicate to it over TCP/IP, and you have to tell it what port to use. 8515 is the default. And then there are a limited number of arguments that you can provide to the ARDOP-C application. I put this one in here, logdir equals dev null. Everything that you're seeing out here, you can see that this spits out information about audio levels here every 10 seconds. If you don't put logdir equals dev null in here, that will be writing constantly to your micro SD card. Okay, so I just put this in here as sort of a default value argument that shuts that off. So if you want to actually save this information on your micro SD card, you just delete this line and then save and restart, and it'll run, you know, and it'll write those these values to a file. Okay. And then under Direwolf, this is pretty much the same as the application, the previous application we were using. The configuration is virtually identical. Your audio capture, the audio rate, this isn't 9600 baud, this is 96,000 samples per second. I recommend using that value for the Direwolf A rate because the FeePi supports that sampling rate. So, and it's a multiple of 48,000. So it does a clean, if it needs to convert to 48,000, then it will do so. And this is essential if you want to use a Direwolf modem speed of 9600. Okay, if you have a peer device that is capable of that as well. So if you're using 9600 here, you want to make sure you're using 96,000 for the Direwolf A rate. But the default is virtually all RMS gateway stations are 1200. So that's what you want to select here. Direwolf also supports these other speeds, 300, 2400, 4800, and 9600. But 1200 is far and away the most common. And then Direwolf PTT, left or right radio again, GPIO 23 or 12, or you can tell it to use rig control. Okay, Direwolf does a great job with rig control on GPIO pins. And I have this information up here for Nexus DRX users. It tells you which cards to use or which audio devices to use and which GPIO pin to use, depending on whether you're connecting your left or right radio. Okay, An audio stats interval, I just shut that off. It prints information about what Direwolf is hearing as far as levels are concerned. I haven't found it to be terribly useful, so the default is 0. And then Direwolf also runs, starts a listener for an AGW port, which you need for Exaster, for example, and a KISS port, which some applications use. And those values can be changed here as well. These are the defaults that I've used for this particular application. This is where you can change the text colors. The text colors, Direwolf has the ability to color the text that appears over here. The caveat is that if you turn the text colors on, it's not terribly good at turning them off again. So sometimes the, other applications like ARDOP and the manager applications which don't use colored text will just use the same color text as what the previous message was. So it may look kind of messy, but it's nice for Direwolf information because it does color code things. I added these two parameters based on a question from Bud. And this allows you to enable digipeating on this station. This is called C-digipeat or connected mode digipeat. And we tested this, or actually Bud and Mick tested it. Is that right, Bud?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And it seems to work. So when you turn this on, and all you have to do is put 0 space 0 in here, and optionally followed by an alias, which is a call sign. It means that if you have a properly constructed string in PAT, you can connect to an intermediate station before you ultimately connect to the RMS gateway. So you connect to this intermediate station. This intermediate station will then digipeat your request to the RMS gateway. And then the reverse happens, the RMS gateway to the intermediate station and then back to your station. So Bud asked about doing this because he couldn't reach the, which maybe you can explain what your test scenario, Bud.
Well, yeah, I clearly have a multipath problem to the Blaine W7BPD-10 RMS gateway. It hears me, but I can't copy it. I hear it, I hear noise, but I can't decode it. And so I was able to skip through Mick to the gateway. Everything takes twice as long. It's not terribly efficient, but it worked. When connecting myself to it doesn't work. And the caveat to this whole thing is that I'm now running W7BPD-11, another RMS gateway. We're testing it out and getting it to replace the one at the repeater site in my garage, and I don't have a multipath problem from my garage. But it was great to be able to experiment with it. It was a little tedious in that I logged in as W7BPD and there was multiple messages in the queue waiting for me, long ones. And so we went on for over a half hour just sending everything twice to get it to me, but it worked.
Yeah, so to be clear, both Mick and Bud were running this TNC manager. Only Mick needed to configure his as a digipeater. I mean, Bud could have configured his station too as a digipeater, but it's not necessary for him to do so because he's not the station that was digipeating in that case. So only the station that needs to do the digipeating needs to have these 2 zeros in here, but it doesn't hurt to have them in anyway. Okay.
This could have applications in maybe a IMCOM situation where you are stuck in a hole somewhere and you need to get traffic in and out, and so you could park a digipeater at a higher location up on a mountain ridge or something and manage to move traffic, it would be last resort, because effectively, you know, it's going to take twice as long as 1200 baud.
That's right. Yep. Okay, so that's the direwolf screen. The PAT screen is similar with the addition of some ARDOP, additional ARDOP parameters if you use PAT with ARDOP. I also added a button here at Bud's request. He wanted the ability to actually see his WinLink password as he was typing it. So if you click this button, a new window will pop up with this WinLink password in clear text, and you can edit it there and save it. Okay. The other thing to remember or to point out is that there is an option here that says ARDOP PAT controls PTT. Remember back on this ARDOP screen here? If you want PAT to control the push to talk and you're using ARDOP, you want to make sure that push to talk here is set to client handles push to talk. Does that make sense? In other words, you don't want both ARDOP and PAT trying to do push to talk. It's a push to talk in ham radio applications is a real mess. There's no standard way to do it. There's, you know, maybe a dozen ways to implement it, and it's, well, it is what it is, I guess. Okay. Let's go back to the PAT screen here. The other change I made is I modified what this button does. So what this button does, it looks pretty much the same, is you can open this window and do a search string and search for example, 2-meter packet stations. And the search string is CN88. Okay, so that's going to find the stations closest to CN88 by distance. Okay, and so it found these stations here. And you can double click on a station, for example, this one. And the change I made is it says you already have this in your alias list. And where this alias list appears is in the PAT web interface, which I'll show you in a minute. Okay. Now, previously, this box said is this, so you already have this in your aliases, and it only said okay, so you weren't allowed to add it again. Now it does allow you to add it again. Okay, but it gave the new one a new name. It appended a random number in the front because the alias lists have to be named uniquely. Okay. All right, so now this one's in there twice. So if I do view, delete, saved PAT connection aliases here, these are the ones that I've previously saved. And you can see this is the one I added, this one at the bottom here. For some reason this, my scroll bar doesn't, it kind of cuts it off at the bottom, but this one is the one we added. Now the reason I added this capability is because we talked about connection mode digipeating before. Well, in order to do that, you have to modify the connect URI for it to work. So this one I just added here, I'm going to double click on it, and it's going to bring up that particular value. And the alias name, I'm going to call it digipeat via, I'll call it NG2G, which is a station here in town. Oops, 2G. Okay. Now what I have to, so this this entry is so that it will remind me, oh, okay, I can digipeat via NG2G in order to connect to KC0 OAS-10. I also have to do this. I have to go down in this field here and put NG2G / KC7 OAS. That tells your station to digipeat through NG2G to get to KC7 OAS. Okay. Now, normally, I wrote this because normally you have to go in and edit a configuration file that's JSON. And if you mess that file up, PAT will not work. So it was important to me, for my own sanity, to write an application here that made that a little more bulletproof. So if I click OK now, then the alias is modified, and you can see it's down here, NG2G KC7 OAS. Okay. Now, if I open I'll exit this here, and if I open the PAT web interface, and I go to Action and Connect, and I do select alias, and I have to do this is one of the problems with this PAT web interface is it doesn't always refresh the it won't refresh the values you just made until you restart PAT, which is unfortunate. So I'm going to close this browser here and close this, and I'm going to do a save and restart here, because it has to reread that configuration file with those aliases in it. You can't force it to reread it while it's running. You have to restart it. Okay, so I'm going to open the PAT web interface. And we'll go to Action, Connect, and select alias. And this is the one I just made, digipeat via NG2G. And if I select that, you can see the target is NG2G / KC7 OAS-10. Okay. Any questions on that? All right, good. The other thing.
Steve, I'm sorry, I had my mic muted and I was talking to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
The thing that wasn't obvious to us at first that got us into trouble is that we didn't realize that this new interface is taking the place of the original one.
Yes.
And Mick and I were running both of them at the same time, and that was creating problems. So the new TNC manager, is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Takes the place of the old one. You don't want to run them both at the same time.
Yeah, in fact, if you try to run the TNC manager, it won't run if the other one's already running.
Oh, you kind of cleaned it up a little bit.
Yep, right. It'll tell you the other one's running or something. And so, yeah, you don't want to. The problem that Mick and Bud were running into is there were two instances of Direwolf running, and they were competing for the same sound card, and it caused all kinds of problems.
Mick and I are really good at going down these rabbit holes, and then Steve plugs them up so that we can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, working on this, in isolation like this, I in the back of my mind, well, of course no one would ever run those two programs at the same time because the TNC manager replaces it. Well, I hadn't told anybody that just existed in my head. So I'm glad Bud, Bud and Mick kind of stumbled upon it, and I put that code in there to make sure it doesn't, they don't interfere.
That's great. Any other questions for this Steve before we go to the other Steve? Well, great. Why don't you go ahead and turn your screen share off? And Mr. Stroh, you want to tell us about this digital library?
I put a link in the chat, and I wrote a semi-long story about it last week in my newsletter. Basically, the group that I volunteer with, Amateur Radio Digital Communications, gave a nearly $1 million grant to the Internet Archive to start slurping in all manner of amateur radio material. I'm biased for the digital stuff, the packet radio stuff, circa 1980 and beyond, but and that's what I'm focused on personally. But the grant is for all things amateur radio and communications, and communications is to be defined more clearly. It was left vague in the grant proposal, so they're casting about a bit to figure that out. But amateur radio, anything amateur radio that you would care to donate to the Internet Archive is a net good, and even things as mundane as copies of QST. The way that the Internet Archive works is they apply the classic library paradigm of, if we have something in our inventory to loan out, we'll loan it out. And we can't loan out any more than what we have, even though they create digital versions of physical media like a magazine. So the more copies of QST that they end up with in their physical archives, the more digital versions they can loan out. I'm basically planning to empty my entire amateur radio archives into the Internet Archive under this program. And I'm going to do it sooner than later, because I suspect that when they get this up and running, it's going to really take off. And it's not just limited to the US, it's worldwide. So I've accumulated over the decades a bunch of unique newsletters, such as Zero Retries, which is near and dear to Bud's heart. I have a nearly complete set of those from the Northwest Amateur Packet Radio Association that are going to go much sooner than later. It's going to be one of the first things. Eventually, they will have a web presence of, being able to find all this stuff easily. It'll look, but I have no idea when that is. They're in the acquisition phase at the moment, which is fine with me. So anyway, all the information is in the link that I sent, and I also posted the article to the digital group mailing list. So if you guys have got stuff that you want to get rid of, get in touch, or donate. It's a donation. And if you have a big enough collection, they might be willing to pay for the shipping to wherever it's going. That's the deal. When I explained the size of my collection, they says, okay, let us know when it's boxed up, and we'll send a pickup slip. So I'm going to be donating all my amateur radio back issues and a fair number of books, and even collections of things like radio electronics. I talked them into taking my collection of radio electronics off my hands, since it had radio in the title.
So Steve, they take care of all the scanning and any copyright issues. They work that out with the original source, or? Yeah, in short, yes. They've been at this for 30 years. So yeah, they've got this kind of thing dialed in. If basically the model is that if anybody complains that has a legitimate copyright claim, they'll pull it out of the library and not make it available, or make it unavailable. Okay.
And one of the things that they are actively doing is asking people who have created content to give them a waiver that they can make it available, which I've done on some of my stuff already. My newsletter, my 2 blogs, my article that I contributed for the DCC last weekend, I've given them you know, I've filled out a form and sent it in that they have carte blanche to do whatever they want with it. And they do a fantastic job of digitizing paper. If you give them a book, just go on their Internet Archive or archive.org and look for, you know, a video, or it's probably on YouTube. They have this amazing machine that comes down that flattens the book slightly. 2 very high resolution cameras take a shot of each page, and then the divider comes up, and it, you know, and humans are turning the pages. It's just it's a real symbiosis, and the book is not damaged at all. I don't know that they do that for magazines, and they have very good processes for preserving old brittle materials. You know, I mean, we're 100 years old. There's some old stuff out there for amateur radio. I'm even going to give them stuff that I've found, like, you know, old versions of the ARRO handbook. They can do a better job than anybody else, short of having the original digital media. And what they kick out in their archive is not just an image scan PDF, but a fully OCR'd PDF of text version, even a ebook version. So, you know, it's fantastically accessible. So I recommend them highly. And if you have an idea that you want to downsize your collection and get it into, you know, for posterity, do it sooner than later, because I really think that they're going to be inundated with offers when, you know, when the word really gets out. And it's just getting out now. He's only started to publicize it in the last couple of weeks. In fact, I think the first public declaration of the existence of him as the archivist for Internet Archive for this project was last weekend at a little 5-minute video blurb at the DCC. So you heard it here. You heard it here first. I had one other thing that I thought was kind of cool. May I screen share, please? Oh, there it is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see. There it is. Okay, guys, can you see the sexy radio?
Yeah.
What looks like a radio. That's actually not a radio. That's a Bluetooth speaker mic with a control panel. And here's the gotcha. Works with Anytone D578 UV series mobile radios with Bluetooth function. So Andy posted this on Facebook today, and I thought, you know, at first I thought this was a gadget, but then I thought that is a perfect fit for what I'm doing around my shop. And crap. Oh, there it is. Stop share. There we go. That's a perfect fit for what I'm doing around my shop. That I'm in a big Faraday cage here inside the shop when the doors are down, but a handheld won't work. But the radios live in a corner of the shop that I'm usually not at, so I can tote this thing. If I get the 578 that is still sitting in the box, if I get that fired up, then I can just use this within the shop and the full power of the 578, including changing frequencies, and you know, et cetera. So that really is going to be a game changer for me. I'm going to get one on order. Thank you, Andy.
So one caveat, little item I want to toss in there is, if anybody is interested, all the factory direct pricing that we've been taking advantage of in the past, I can get on this unit as well. So please, if you want to get one, do not buy it for that full price. I've already talked to Bob Wan. I've got the direct price, and I already got put on the list. And so I'm getting one as soon as they become available. He's saying early to mid-October. They've been building firmware on this thing and polishing it for the last 2 years. He's had one ever since. I've talked to him a couple times, but they're to a point where they feel they got the firmware real close. There always will be changes, right? But it's ready for production to be sent out. So I'm stoked about it. If anybody else wants to mess around with one, let me know, and we'll get you in and get you in order.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The next thing I wanted to bring up, and I don't know that I'm not expecting any kind of a resolution tonight. I just want to see what other people are doing, and I'm really curious as to whether Andy has seen this problem with any of the RMS gateways that he's got running in 3 or 4 different places. We're working on replacing the RMS gateway at the Harvey Road site, which is a PC that anytime there's a power failure, someone has to go to the site and reboot the computer. And so we built up a new Nexus unit, and I've got the RMS gateway software running. It's running as a -11. When we replace it, it'll become the -10. It's on the exact same frequency. It's 145.60. So if you want to try it out, you can. It's W7 BPD-11. But what we're finding out is frustrating is that RMS gateway will not allow us to connect to it twice consecutively. If I connect to it, it works fine. I'm playing ham word, which means I want to send more than one message off to do this word puzzle. And the first one goes out just fine, and everything works. And 15 minutes later, when I want to get the results of my guess, I can't connect. Or it will connect and then it just sits there and does absolutely nothing. And I have to restart the gateway, and then it'll work again. And this morning we were experimenting with it, and we discovered that it's not a problem if someone else connects to it between your two connects. So if I connect to it, I can't connect to it a second time, but Rob can. And when Rob gets done, he can't connect to it a second time, but I can. Have you seen anything like that, Andy?
No, so I haven't set up a new image in a while, so I'm running, I don't want to say old. I have some new image stuff, but I haven't done anything as of recently. So since you mentioned that, I've got my station at the house that needs to be gone through. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and go through the exercise. I'll do the same and see if I recreate the same problem or if it works.
Yeah.
So I have some news on that.
Okay. What do you know, Steve?
I discovered that the WECG station is behaving exactly the same way.
Oh, well.
And it is running the new Bullseye. Now, that is a fairly recent development on that station, because the WECG station has had the Bullseye image and this RMS gateway software installed for many, many months.
It's been a couple of years now. I think we had the new image on.
Yeah, but in the last maybe month and a half, it has started to exhibit this behavior, which I just noticed 2 days ago. So I think what's happened is that there's something in the AX25 stack that was updated fairly recently when they did a kernel update that broke it. And so now I at first I thought I must be doing something wrong, but hearing Bud say he's seeing the same behavior, so okay, this is something endemic to the operating system. So I was going to contact what's his name? N7NIX, Bud. What's his name?
Oh, Basil.
Basil, yes. He's the guy that wrote the RMS gateway software. And he's a real down in the weeds Linux guy. And I was going to contact him and run this by him.
Oh, great. Yeah. So another thing that I've observed, and maybe you could help us understand how the watchdog timer works. As we were experimenting with it today, I'm running the Dash 11 remotely from here in my ham shack using real VNC, and it would appear to just lock up. I couldn't move anything. Um, it was like I'm going to have to go out to the garage and reboot the Pi. But in the course of talking to Mark and Rob and Mick as we're troubleshooting this thing, I'll look over and all of a sudden I'll see that it's running again. And what's happened is the Raspberry Pi out there has rebooted itself. It's just, I've seen this before where I look and I go, whoa, it's just rebooting itself. And when it comes up, the gateway is running, but the gateway manager software is no longer on the screen.
Right.
So it's obvious. But if you've ever, if you're familiar with real VNC, you can reboot the computer you're connected to, and then the screen goes gray, and you see the little spinning daisy, and then it comes back up again. And so I saw that several times this morning. I could lock it up, and then apparently the watchdog or something says, oh, I got to reboot the Pi. Maybe you could shed some light on how that watchdog works and what's going on.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact criteria that it works, but there is a watchdog daemon that runs on the Raspberry Pi. And when it detects certain conditions, it will reboot. It will issue the reboot command. And I don't remember what those conditions are. There are several things that it checks for continuously. And if it's not meeting a certain criteria, then it says, oh, this app has, not this app, but something in the kernel has stopped. I need to reboot.
Well, clearly I'm poking that rib.
Yeah, exactly. This is a Pi 3, Bud?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Is it a 3B plus or a 3B?
No, it's just a 3.
It's just a 3B. Okay.
I could bring up the screen. It tells me on the screen. I'll double check that here in a second. But
I haven't seen that problem.
Yeah, it says it's a Raspberry Pi 3 Model B.
Model B, okay. And I believe that's what the WECG one is as well. Let me verify that here.
I think we moved. Did we move WCG to a 4?
No, it's a 3B.
It's a 3.
Yep. I have not seen that on the WECG node, which is the same model. Not sure what to suggest there.
Well, we'll see what you can find out from Basil. Say hello to Basil for me.
Sure.
This is that station right now, and the gateway manager looks like this, and I'm able to, when this locks up and I can't get in, I just come in here and click the restart button, and I'll turn my volume up. And if I hit restart, it goes through its paces here and shuts everything down, and then it will come back up, and I know that it's up again and it's safe for me to connect because it will send a packet. You'll hear it here in just a few seconds. So make me there. And then I know it's safe to connect again. But somehow or another, having another user come in and connect solves the problem. So one of the things I'll play with tomorrow is if I was to change the SSID on my call sign. I don't think WinLink cares what your SSID is. So if I was to check mail as WB7FHC-0 or WB7FHC-8, it would still give me my mail. And that might allow me to go through as a second time. I'll try that.
Yeah, that would be a good test. The other thing is that there are some folks who have posted in one of the groups.io, I don't remember which one, about Pat exhibiting the same behavior as a client not being able to connect more than once. It gets this already in use error, and you can't connect. You can't connect again. But another station can connect.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
And the brick wall that you run into isn't always the same. So sometimes you get this already use error. Sometimes you get one that says connection refused.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you simply don't get an ACK at all. You send a connect request to it and nothing happens.
Right.
So there's 3 different anomalies there that keep you from doing what you should be able to do.
So, Bud, have you tried restarting your PAT client and trying to connect a second time? Does that work?
Well, yes, in fact, I have WinLink Express running on my PC using my Direwolf as a network TNC, and it will not allow me to connect a second time with the same call sign.
Okay.
And I switched software. I'm running a PC now instead of a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, I wonder if this behavior isn't related. I mean, they both have to use the AX25 stack, so it's suspicious that their behavior is so similar from the client perspective and from the gateway perspective, because they're both using the same underlying AX25 stack.
Well, it's as if we've disconnected, but it doesn't think I've gone away.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Well, Bud or Steve, does being that he's operating it through VNC have anything to do with it? What if he were to just go out to a keyboard and mouse in the shop and see if it does the same thing?
Well, no, Bob, that's not the case. It's actually I'm running software in the ham shack as if I was somewhere else in the county, and it's a totally different computer. And it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that the gateway is running VNC. I'm running VNC on the gateway so that I can see what's going on.
Yeah, it shouldn't. I would be shocked if it had anything at all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just a guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In fact, yeah, the VNC is running on a PC, and my digital station is running on a Nexus. So.
Right.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what Basil might have to say. Track this.
Yeah, I'll run some more tests on WECG station and gather some logs so that I can send them off to Basil.
It's entirely possible that the other stations are doing it and we just haven't noticed it. If any of our gateways, for example, are getting regular use, there's a turnover. As soon as a different person connects, you're no longer locked out.
Well, under normal use, you would log in, get your mail, and you're gone.
Right, and then
you're
somebody
not
else comes
right back in again unless there's a piece of mail that you didn't answer that you needed to answer right away. Then you might log back in again. But
if you're playing ham word at 5 p.m. on Sunday, you're going to want to connect over and over again every 15 minutes till you solve the puzzle. And that's when it becomes obvious.
Mm.
Which incidentally, I've said it over and over again, it's a great way to practice WinLink is to play that game.
about 3 weeks ago, I was playing it and I got locked out. It would not transmit, not to Telnet, not to another gateway, not to the gateway I was on. It just didn't send. And then it would send, and then I'd try to retrieve later, and I got nothing back from them. So I don't know where it was there, but I don't know what.
But in hindsight, Mark, it sounds like you're describing what we've been talking about.
It sounds related, but it's not quite the same, because I don't remember if it did finally get there and I couldn't retrieve it until like a couple of weeks later. I can't even remember. It was just a screwed up mess.
What gateway do you use?
A lot of times I'm using BTEC, but sometimes I'll use Telnet. Sometimes I'll use WBPD or W7BPD 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, BTEC is running this RMS gateway software, but it's on an old kernel.
Correct. I was going to say BTEC has not been updated.
Right.
I don't generally have a problem with BTEC, but it's like when I had that problem, and I'm still running. I have not done a recent Nexus update for any of the apps or anything. Not for almost a year. So I don't know.
Yeah, I imagine that the RMS the Linux RMS gateway software or systems that are out in the wild probably haven't been updated in years. So this may not be a very widely known problem. But yeah, I'm definitely going to talk to Basil about it.
You would think if Basil is keeping his gateway up to date, he would have stumbled onto it by now. You know. I can't hit his. He's over on Lopez.
Oh,
and,
okay.
And I don't have a shot at it at all.
Oh. Is it under his call sign?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's N7NIX-10.
Oh, all right.
Maybe I could figure out how to digipede into it and give it a try. Maybe I could break his too.
Right. Yeah, it isn't a problem with his software. He's been running the same software for like 3 years, but I think he probably would have some insight into the underlying AX25, which has been updated. That has definitely been updated in the last couple of months. So I'll let you know what I hear.
Well, that's great. Anybody else have anything they want to throw out there, questions or comments or anything to show and tell?
I just wanted to ask Steve one quick question. On your TNC manager,
yep.
If you digipede, it's automatic. In other words, we'll say I'm looking at TC7OAX is on, I'm just using this as an example, 9.9, and I'm going to digipede through NG2G is on 9.3.
Right. So that was maybe a bad example. So NG2G's radio.
I have to change my radio. I mean, if I'm using your radio control software, that's going to automatically happen, right?
That's correct. But
I'm manual, so I'm going to have to remember to change frequencies.
Okay. All 3 stations participating in that connection have to be on the same frequency.
Yeah.
So I used NG2G, who happens to have a gateway. I probably shouldn't have used him as an example because he's already running a gateway, and he wouldn't be a
he wouldn't be a choice.
Yeah, so the person you're digipeding through has to be on the same frequency as you, the client,
and the gateway.
And the gateway, correct. Yep.
And there's the big lull. Well, we've thinned the crowd here down a little bit, down to 10. We were up at about 17. It's been, I think, a productive evening. I'm ready to pull the plug and let the recording start processing. We'll get this out there. It's going to be sunny tomorrow, right?
Sunny and not as hot.
It looks better today. Today was 82 at my place this afternoon.
All right. Okay, speak up now or I'm clicking the button.
Okay. See you later.
Bye, everybody.